Well, welcome to another How Conversation on Moral Leadership. We're really happy to have with us today a friend and a partner of the How Institute, Tom Monahan. Tom was just recently announced as the new CEO of Heidrick Struggles, an executive search and management consulting company. Tom, welcome, and we're so looking forward to this conversation with you today. How are you? Where are you? And before I get into an introduction, we just want to hear from you.
Sure, I'm in Washington today, or the Washington area. As you know, I'm about 10 miles due north of where you are. So, but we're both in the DC area, and for those who care about such things, you can just really feel spring, which it's been a gorgeous couple days.
Fantastic. We do have the magnolias, and we also have the cherry blossoms in full bloom. Tom grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, actually in a small town outside. Some of you may know Weymouth, Massachusetts. His grandparents owned a carnival business that is still in the family today. And I think you'll hear throughout this conversation a real theme of creativity and curiosity. Tom graduated from Harvard University, magna cum laude, and he also served as a former CEO and chair of the board of directors of CEB. Tom also is managing partner in a family investment fund called Norton Street Holdings, and is the former CEO and president of DeVry University, now vice chairman of the board. And I'm so looking forward to this conversation with our listeners here today.
And thank you, and thank you, Dana, for obviously professional partnership and inviting me to this, and thanks to the How Institute more broadly. This is the set of activities How Institute engages in, and the set of conversations they enable here, elsewhere, and most importantly in workplaces around the world are so important. And I'm delighted to be a tiny contributor to the work.
We'll jump right in then, and I know that this is going to be a timeless How conversation on moral leadership with some of the lessons that you will share with us and maybe even charge us with. So let's go back. Winston Churchill says the further back you look, the maybe further ahead you might see. So let's go back to the beginning a little bit. If we can talk maybe about your grandparents owning a carnival business and, lessons learned from childhood growing up in Weymouth, and what Norton Street means to you, and how that's forged how your background and your childhood has forged the leader that you have become and are becoming.
Sure. I think, the anybody who's lucky enough to lead people or work in an environment and have had professional success, who doesn't work the word luck into their first 20 words of their story has some soul searching to do, because any one of us who's enjoyed successful careers and doing work they love has to recognize that just all sorts of luck goes into that, right? Just parents who believed in me, good schools nearby, lots of people happy to provide mentorship and advice, and health. All there's born in the U.S. in the latter half of the 20th century into a happy, healthy family in a neighborhood with good schools, and lots of other tailwinds at my back. But the family business was and is a carnival, and like all family businesses, you get put to work early. And probably the most important lesson for me there, it's a fascinating business system in that you have kind of different businesses under one roof, if you will. If you think about rides and games, very different businesses. But the one human lesson I learned was, it's some combination of people really most people have passion for doing the work they do well, and are eager to share what they know with people. If you just ask them, what do you do? Why do you do it this way? And I found if I carried away one lesson from those years, it was, if you ask people, they'll tell you stuff.
Tom, throughout your career, you've had really varied experiences. Deloitte as a senior consultant, CEO of CEB, president of DeVry University, now stepping up as CEO of an executive search and management consulting company, Heidrick Struggles. What is it that draws you to such diverse opportunities, and are there leadership challenges that come with changing sectors?
Dana, you and I had talked about this, which is, I guess the unifying theme is someone told me the story, which I thought was a good one. They were being asked to evaluate a leader for a role, and their boss said, what about so and so? What about so and so? What about so and so? And the leader said to their boss, "This person's amazing. Their one drawback is not that good with people, but don't worry about it; they'll be fine." And the more senior leader said, "Yeah, that ends up being a problem because people are the only species we employ." And these businesses are all people-driven businesses. I think what's been interesting, and maybe this was the um, a learning. This I had back to the luck thing. The CEB experience was incredibly fun, being part of really building the company. Maybe the most interesting thing about it was it's a timeless story, which is um, because I had been part of building the company and a lot of our businesses and a lot of our processes, et cetera, I was an expert in our business, which is dangerous, actually. And probably I need to go through a little bit of a reacquaintance with leadership principles to learn to be an effective leader, which is Will Rogers. My favorite quote is Will Rogers said something to the effect of, "It ain't the things we don't know that get us in trouble. It's the things we know that just ain't so." When you're in a business you've been in for a couple decades, you know things, and clients have changed, the market has changed, people have changed, the way work is done has changed, but in your knowing it isn't an asset. That curiosity and also businesses built around exceptional people, it's a theme that has recurred even across industries that actually look different, but ultimately that exceptional people at the center is a real commonality.
Let's keep going on your time, because you were with as CEO of CEB from 2005 to 2017. So that's a long time. And the goal there was to practice research benchmarks, decision support tools for business leaders. And so what are some of the frameworks maybe leaders can be equipped with in today's society, and ways that we can support developing leaders along that journey?
I think a couple of things that again, every leader has their own toolkit, but I obviously put curiosity pretty high on my list. Have I really listened? The second thing is, listening is not a passive activity. In particular, we're learning that and as we start to think about a more diverse and inclusive workplace, desire to talk and knowledge aren't perfectly correlated. I'm not going to get to the point that they're inversely correlated, but how do you seek out perspectives? How do you make sure you're kind of checking out silences? How do you make sure you're bring a full perspective? Because there's a natural tendency in any organization to listen to the speech as it is rather than be curious. So maybe that's the second thing, which is first thing, curious. Second thing is, listening is not a passive activity, it's an active activity. Third thing is, facts are your friends. I forget which CEO it was, but you used to say, if we're going to run the operation off of opinions, we should probably use mine because I'm the CEO. But if there are facts, that might also be a different and more effective way to run the organization. I think facts are your friends. Chasing the stray fact, four sort of big leadership principles, curiosity, listening is an active activity, facts are your friends, and finding the collective and shared ambition.
In your description of curiosity, I really hear an underlying humility in being curious and admitting you don't maybe know everything, which is hard as a leader, particularly people on the hero's journey, like, I need to know everything because I'm the CEO. So would you elaborate a little bit more on this curiosity? And I think for our listeners, why leaders really need to be asking more questions, and to do that from a place of humility.
For some reason, I undertook this exercise, and it's you can go onto I'll pick the New York Times website. Most major newspapers have a feature where you can go just pick a day and look at the headlines from that day. Go back even 2 years and how if you had formed an opinion based on the headlines of that day on anything in the world, how incorrect you would have been. and that itself, if you need like a booster shot of humility, take a look at that and take a look at what your mental model might have been. Pick a date and go to it. And for that reason, the world's in a state of consistent reset, and curiosity is the only way to encounter that. We've done a lot of work at Heidrick around, what we obviously a very common thing that are, again, exceptional people at the core of the business. Our exceptional people are the folks who are in our search business, who are in the boardroom every day helping companies choose great leaders. The shared wisdom in a recent report we put out around what kind of the overarching question, what are boards looking for right now, and let's say in particular in CEOs, but C-suite leaders more broadly, they are looking for the ability to learn. So boards are looking for kind of the ability to learn as a senior leader, because they're realizing that any attempt to sort of replicate the past is highly unlikely to reflect the future. And so that curiosity is a really important part of learning.
And you wrote recently, and I'm going to share with our listeners a quote, if you don't mind, Tom, of anyone who knows me or reads what I write understands that I'm passionate about the work of finding, developing, and supporting impactful leaders. Experience and data have taught me that great leadership is the single most important element of great organizational and corporate performance. And so some people still are buying into this, there's natural leaders out there, leaders are born. And you've talked about qualities that are important that can be grown. Curiosity, learning how to learn. So how do you respond to that statement that, there's natural leaders or there's this opportunity to learn through experience? Where do you fall on that spectrum?
It is totally okay, both across time or at a point in time, for someone to say, hey, I want to be an individual contributor right now. Again, some of the most impactful leaders are people without a leadership title whose professional excellence and their values shape an organization. But it's totally okay for someone to say, I don't want a formal leadership role.
Yeah, and we talk about that in terms of positions of authority, or having people with moral authority, in positions of authority. You use the term summoning and switchboarding, which I find really intriguing in this. Do you mind sharing with our listeners what you mean by that, summoning and switchboarding?
When you say who wants to be a leader, on balance, or who wants this next big leadership assignment, on balance, sometimes you'll find in different organizations, there are categories of folks who say, it's not for me. I don't look like the person who had that job the last 3 times. I didn't come from the background of the person who had that job the last 3 times. So an important part of being a leader sometimes is to summon people, not just it's not open out call. It's to go check someone out and say, hey, why haven't you put your hand up for this leadership development program? Why haven't you, because you can see that they're great, but there is that, and often there's a couple of things. People are often uncomfortable sometimes with, will my style work? And I'm like, that's hasn't hurt you yet. And, we all grow and change as leaders, but I think, really important work of the leader is to create interest and summon people to the work of leadership. And when I talk about switchboarding, the logic there is leadership development, an important, at least for me, being a developer of leaders, back to humility. And so you spend a lot of time in developing leaders, not so much saying, let me teach you this, you get your pen out because I'm about to talk at you, but instead saying, okay, I think that's an important area for you to grow and develop. Totally hear you. I don't know a darn thing about this. Or I'm not that good at it. Let me find the person who you need to learn from on that issue. You're trying to keep, as part of people, I'll say you should have a personal board of directors, and I agree with that. And part of the reason you should have something like that is if that group gets broad enough, you start to be able to say, well, this is the person who teaches this is the person I know who teaches this thing best. There's a great book called the Council of Dads, which our mutual friend Max Steyer features. There's a chapter about Max, and it's what's interesting is it was written by a friend of Max's who was told he had a terminal disease and had to confront the fact that his kids might not have a dad, and sort of said, how do I, he was going to do the dad work. And came to that conclusion that actually, he had a number of good friends, each of one who had something really important to teach. And it would, rather than trying to replace, him with one person, he sort of tapped each of the friends to teach that important thing. And in some sense, that's a good metaphor for how as a leader ought to think about developing their team, is the council of developers, if you will.
Tom, you're a very busy leader, and I know our listeners are as well. And our How founder and chairman, Dov Seidman, often talks about the pause and the importance to take this time to reflect, reconnect, rethink, and reimagine our future. How is it that you pause and recharge?
A few things that I've found to be useful. One is kind of the loosely call it a gratitude practice. So it's like usually my gratitude practice involves actual people. Thank you for doing this. But yesterday I was talking with one of my colleagues, Billy Dexter. I said, Billy, who's actually just as a fun kind of small world fact, Billy wrote the foreword to our friend James Rousseau's book. And Billy's a leader at Heidrick, and he and I were chatting, and I said, I'm practicing literally. I'm going to thank Zoom at the end of the day today, because it's been hard on me today, but it's been hugely important. And teams and the engineers and people who built those products and made them have made all of us more effective at work. And it's kind of bizarre, but gratitude practice ends up, sort of, who am I saying thank you at the end of the day to? I have a really active sort of intention and meditation practice. My meditation teacher, Jonathan Faust, always says, look at your calendar, look at every meeting, think about how you want to feel at the end of that meeting, physically feel. And that will and then think about how you want to manage that meeting. And I'm not perfect at that, but it's a really useful practice for me to say, how do I want to feel at the end of that meeting?
So just a couple more questions. One is, as we think about our listeners and a lot of young and aspiring moral leaders, what kind of advice do you have for them?
I'd go back to that, Peter Drucker theme of get to know yourself really well. How do you do your best work? Because I think that turns out to be, you can't make the world conform to how you do your best work, whatever. But you can know, how you do your best work, and you be honest about that. You know what you're great at, and organize how you work around that, being super clear around your strengths, how you do your best work, and being honest with it with other people. Like, I don't just, this is how I work best. That probably is the most important thing. Second, our friend and colleague Elisa Wad always gives the advice, bloom where you're planted. Every role has an opportunity for you to grow as a leader. Some have huge opportunities, and those are fantastic. But even ones you say, this is probably not the right place for me, you can actually still find ways to exert, leadership daily and grow yourself. And I think that's really powerful advice, because I think you're like, when you're earlier in your career, you maybe sometimes are looking around for the right, the perfect next thing, and you miss some of the opportunities to say, hey, how can I lead and grow and have more impact onto where I am?
Excellent advice for all of us as learners and growing moral leaders. So the final question is, moral leaders tend to be purveyors of hope. And so in this moment in time, what's giving you a sense of hope?
There's so much to be, and I tend to be also, we're a little bit of a fraught time, as and we've had these fraught times before, and I've never been so Pollyannish to say, this advance in technology is unequivocally good, right? But I think on balance, most advances in technology have been good. They've helped. We found ways to harness them, to govern them, and they're not without negative consequences. Again, back to my go on to the New York Times page and pick any date more than a year ago and click on the front page and see what predictions you would have made based on reading that front page, and I'll probably be very wrong, but those a lot of things give me hope, and back to the facts, right? Back to the not what I happen to tune in on the TV, but the long arc of most of these trend lines is going in a really positive place.
Fantastic message, and begs the question, do we really want to go back?
Yeah.
And Tom Monahan, you have been just a joy to have in conversation on moral leadership. It's an honor to have you as a partner and friend of the Howe Institute for Society. We know that these lessons are going to live on, and we appreciate the fact that you're going to continue to be on this journey of advancing the wave of moral leadership with us. So we're grateful, and we wish you all the best in your new position as the CEO of Heidrick Struggles executive search and management consulting company. So congratulations and do great work.